Hello, everybody out there in Radio Land. It's me, DJ Danger Groove. Y'all listening to Electro-Pop Therapy, only on 89.1 WIDR, Kalamazoo, your only source of music that makes you want to move your butt, sing in the shower. We have a very rare and wonderful treat on the program today. I got a chance to interview a band that we've played on the show quite a few times and are quite local, right here in the Southwest Michigan area, just right up in Grand Rapids. So we're going to be talking to Kaiser. Am I pronouncing that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
All right. And we're going to be, I have some burning questions about their discography, how they put together their music. They've also got a show and some physical releases coming up we're going to be talking about. Before we get into all that, could y'all just maybe just tell the listeners, just introduce yourselves, and then we'll get into all the fun burning questions.
Sure. Yeah. You want to go first?
Sure. All right. Well, I'm Kaylin and I do vocals and I play keyboards.
Yep. And I'm David. I am the main singer of Kaiser, and I play some guitar as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry. I think the audio on the third person is a little low. Can't really hear it.
Is he? You know, let's just pass this.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. My name is Rick. I also play keyboards. I also sing backup vocals, and I also play bass a little bit on a few songs. We'll probably be doing that more in the future.
Okay, great. So the first thing I want to start out with is just kind of like, a boilerplate question. How y'all got together, kind of how the band formed. If you could tell folks, how did Kaiser get started?
So I think I'll take this one. Originally, Kaiser was an idea that came from a side project of kind of like a Steel Panther thing, writing some like hair metal 80s tunes and like messing around with synths, like Van Halen style stuff, and for me personally, it was just kind of like a thing where I wanted to make music that sounded like, the video games and movies and TV shows from the 1980s and stuff I grew up watching. And I was just like, when I found out that there was a genre of music out there called Synthwave that existed, I was like, I immediately like dropped out of rock and roll and tried to recruit people and find anyone that would be willing to get into Synthwave. And I found Kaylin, we kind of had a mutual friend and she joined the project. And so from there it was kind of finding other people, because we wanted to make it a band, even though it was electronic. And most electronic music producers are single people or DJs. So for us to try to put a group together, I thought I'd just do something different with it, and we write as a group too. So it's maybe a different approach to electronic music than a lot of people take, I think. But yeah, I mean, it was essentially just an amalgam of different ideas coming together and then becoming Kaiser. Really, at the end of the day, we didn't know what it was going to be, a full band, and it just kind of turned from a joke project on the side to a full-time thing. So.
Wow, really interesting. Anybody else want to chime in on that before I move on to the next one?
I feel like that was very succinct. I don't really think there's anything to add into that other than, nothing.
Okay. Okay, so I've got a series of questions that kind of probe a little bit deeper into your album releases. Before that, I was curious. I'm a huge a fan of the holiday of Halloween, and one of your earlier releases was Dead by Dawn. It's this really great Halloween track. It's like an ode to the Evil Dead series. I was kind of curious, like the whole timeline of y'all getting together as a band. I think it's one of the first things you put out on BANDCAMP. But how long had you been together at that point, and what inspired you to put that out as your first single, and also like that really inspired music video that came out along with it. I know a lot of people will just kind of put a track out onto Bandcamp, but like that has a very like specific theme and a very like fun and you know, it's looks like there's some effort put into that music video as well. So wondering if you could talk about that just real quick.
Yeah, so I'm gonna say a thing, and then I'm gonna hand it over to David after this. But actually, what's interesting about this track is that this is the first track that I sang on, and the first track that I was brought in to like check out the band. I wasn't even part of the band at this point, so they had me come in and like sing on the track and then kind of invite me to be in the band after that. So it was just interesting that that's like the one that kind of sticks out to you. It was just like kind of the, I don't know if it was, yeah, it was the genesis of the band really. But yeah, I think who was it that we worked with?
Somebody called White Knuckle.
Yeah.
If you could just make sure the mic is having trouble hearing.
Some technical difficulties. I'm not sure why.
Oh.
Does it sound like it's working now?
It is now. Yes.
Sorry about that.
Sorry about
well,
that.
at any rate, yeah, we worked with a guy named Drake Welton. It's a friend of ours from the Saginaw area across the state. He's done commercials for large automobile companies, and he kind of knew his stuff when it came to videography. And so we wanted to make Dead by Dawn into sort of an ode to the Evil Dead series for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's cool that you picked up on that because some people don't notice all the references, but there's tons in there, little tidbits and stuff. But you know, we wanted to make it campy and cheesy and fun, and I think that's kind of what we went for with that.
Yeah, and with the Necronomicon and
Yeah, like we actually got the real Necronomicon for that video
yeah, we
made.
bought it
way.
on eBay or something. Yeah,
This guy makes some like
Yeah.
custom order, and like took a couple weeks to get, but it was so, you know, pre-COVID we got that. I thought was pretty quick within like 4 weeks. Now
Yeah.
it'd probably take a year to get.
Oh
So
yeah.
then-
Yeah, no, well, it really bleed the quality of it bleeds out, and you know, especially some of the horror junkies know that was, of course, Legendaries, or it was filmed in northern Michigan, and yeah.
Yeah.
So I think now I have some questions about your kind of three mainline albums. So your first released, Landline, was around 2019, and the thing I really love about this album, it absolutely just bleeds synthwave culture. Like the lyrics, it's almost like it's like a synthwave glossary. First to a lot of the common aesthetics, you know, kind of the retro gazing nature that a lot of artists put into it. And I'm thinking particularly of songs like you know, Mixtape, which invokes a lot of like analog technology, or Shadowrun, with kind of these references to this cyberpunky near future. I was wondering, could you walk the listeners kind of through the songwriting process for what is very much kind of the self-aware love letter to the genre itself? And you talked a little bit about that on the intro, but I was wondering if you could expand on that a bit.
that is high praise.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, Landline was the first real deep dive into retrowave that like for me as a songwriter coming into a new genre and trying to cut our teeth on what making synthwave was about, and vocal synthwave at that. And there is a huge division between, I think, unfortunately, the instrumental side sometimes and the vocal side. The vocal side tends to just be seen as maybe more pop music, versus the instrumental side sometimes being more the darker side. A lot of dark synths doesn't always tend to have vocals. But the reason I say that is we hadn't done our research on our homework enough to draw any distinctions between that. So sometimes we had a song that was sort of about, you know, like the Shadowrun series, the Sega games from the late 80s, early 90s. And then that was based on the TSR, like Dungeons and Dragon Makers RPG. You know, you pack that stuff into a song and you write that. Not everybody's going to catch the reference, but for me, or at least for us as a band, at that point, I was just writing anything about anything and throwing it against the wall and see what would stick. You know, obviously, you know, we got songs like Crystal Lake. There's songs like Jetpacks that have a little bit more maturity to them, I would say. But I just like it. I think it's fun to write about science fiction things. I think there's enough love songs out there personally already. you know, I think it's fun to write about other things later as we've developed, you know, and we started on Landline. It was actually this huge space concept. We write about that a lot, you know. So, but yeah, for Landline, it was just kind of like an experiment, and the fact that it had so many songs on it.
Yeah, it was the first record, and there were so many songs. It was 14 songs on that album, and like, yeah, it was literally just kind of throwing everything out there and seeing what stuck.
Because we had no idea what people would like,
right,
or not like, or what we liked, because everyone liked something different. So it was all made the record. It was just like nothing gets cut. Then now we cut a lot. Back then, you know, it was quantity over quality, maybe not quality, but quantity of writing, I would say, and we just kind of just indulged ourselves on that one, I think. So I hope we answered.
Yeah, I'll say, you know, from the perspective of, at least from the perspective of an electro-pop radio DJ, you really hit all the quadrants with that one. Oh, you know, a quick thing, it's like, you know, that kind of distinction between vocal and instrumental. Yeah, it's interesting. And you know, I noticed if your listeners are curious, y'all put out instrumental versions of all your albums too. And I would also like y'all's actual synth work is also very laudable and praiseworthy. And
thank you.
Yeah. And never forget, if you're snob about this stuff, actually I think one of my favorite cuts from last year was I think John Carpenter made a remix of one of the Church's songs. It's really chef's kiss.
I have heard that.
Yeah. So next question, again, kind of in line with talking about the albums. Ghosts of Miami came out 2020, and I might kind of sew into this question just I mean, I think most bands have been asked this during the pandemic, like, you know, it's like the challenges of recording during a plague or whatever. But I think the more so I did want to ask more also about like songwriting on this one as well. So it was about a year later. Also had a lot of those kind of synthwave themes. I think maybe not kind of scaled back just a little bit. I was kind of curious, like, so just two-part question. One, just like the challenges of recording during COVID, but also thinking about something that really struck me with Ghosts of Miami is kind of the relationship between synthwave and like particular locations or environments that kind of like, you know, take you to a certain place, like, whether it's like, you know, the Pacific Coast Highway or Tropical Beach or a cyberpunk city, that sort of thing. Kind of like speaking like artistically, what do you think the link between like sound and places, and then maybe the more practical question of recording during COVID?
Do you want to talk about that? It was interesting. You know, what's funny is, so we all worked together when the pandemic started. And because we were already in close proximity at work, we hadn't been like sent home from being in contact. We were still coming in. It was early days. So at that point, there weren't, it's like late 2019, early 20, we were releasing Ghosts on May the 4th, 2020. So we had been
mostly all written.
Most of the record was done,
recorded
in December.
off.
The real challenge was actually mixing it and then trying to get it out on time,
right?
With just everybody, you know, in quarantine, and what we went through was kind of a lackluster release schedule, trying to put out a record during the pandemic. So our challenge wasn't as much making it as it was making it known. You know, and it's still a record that we look back on, and there's many songs that we love on it, and we just always kind of feel like that one for us never really kind of got its due, almost.
Yeah. One thing that it kind of ties back to a previous question that you'd asked as well about Landline being like a huge amalgam of a bunch of different styles and a bunch of different ideas. I think that we did cut a few songs, and we managed to like kind of, you know, comb through them to make them have a specific feel. I think that was a little bit more evident on that album versus Landline. Ghost was, I mean, as opposed to Landline, which was kind of, you know, up and down and all over the place. But
you're meaning that I get what you're saying. Yeah. So we focused more on, I think, having our themes.
Yeah, it was more of
It was
like a
themed
themed
for sure.
album.
Yeah, it was meant to be it was a sad record. I mean, it was
Yeah.
meant to be kind of sad. It was the state of the world for sure, you know, heading into that, because we knew something was coming and we just didn't know what. And
Yeah.
so yeah, we did a lot of live streaming, which I hate personally.
Yeah.
Just because the audio is never that great, but that was the really the only saving grace of that time, was that we could do some live stream performances and try to like keep the dream of live music alive, or keep music alive during that time in any way that
Yeah.
we sort of could. But
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
we
definitely.
come in like during that whole time, you know, just because we were already working together and
Right,
everything.
yeah.
And like, so we actually have access to a studio all the time too. You know, it's not.
like our house,
Yeah.
so we sealed this place off, like no guests. It was just us near the end, and then after that we just kind of separated for a couple months while the quarantine was going on, you know. So
Yeah, well, I mean, the production really shines through on that album. And it's interesting, like Ghosts of Miami. It was hard for a lot of musicians that year, really getting traction. I mean, yeah, it's personal anecdote. I was supposed to see LaRue in Chicago in March of 2020, and they had to cancel the tour. It was like, oh, and yeah, it's been a rough couple years for those of who really like live music coming out. Although I will say to Ghosts of Miami, I think that was the first one I heard from you guys. That's how I found out about y'all. I think it was playing on like Neon FM, one
Right.
of the kind of synthwave YouTube channels. But really good record, and yeah, I would love to we'll talk a little bit more about physical release stuff in a bit, but I'd love to maybe get a cassette or something of it later.
for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so the next one is about your most recent one. It's the album, the most current album you got out. It's the one you're kind of actively I know you've been actively promoting. And what's really interesting as a fan and a listener is it's a bit of a departure from your last two albums. It has a much more personal feel to it. It deals with kind of more earnest and existential topics. There's stuff about breakups and heartaches, and it really feels like a lot of the songs are talking more like about like personal experiences and that sort of thing. So I was curious, like, how much of that was an intentional choice? Was it like, we're going to switch gears from Landline and Ghosts of Miami in this particular direction? Is it more kind of spontaneous, like, this is what we feel about writing right now? So if you could kind of talk a little bit with the listeners about that songwriting process for Animals.
That was a hard record to make, I think.
Mhm.
By the time we got to starting that album, I think that everyone had come in the studio with different ideas of what they wanted to make a record sound like. And that is a record that is what you get when everybody has different ideas and you try to mash them all together. Songs like The Forest, songs like Phantoms, still kind of have that like science fiction feel from Landline. Those two songs in particular are one's a kind of about a guy who's it's basically like a cyberpunk version of the movie Memento, and then The Forest is just the Matrix. Really, it's just VR. But yeah, there are some relational stuff on there. I would say like Dreamers and Disconnected. There's some sort of ethereal feel. Yeah. So I guess for us, like we kind of were just trying to not, I guess, do the same thing over and over again. Because like if Synthwave's got a finite amount of ideas, right? So like how many references to palm trees in Miami can you make?
And something we talk about quite a bit is the idea of making things that sound like us, but still not repeating the same things over and over again. Not writing the same song multiple times, but still having it that same sound, that same feel, so that it connects to the past albums, but isn't the same album.
The other thing that's important to note, and it's right along with that, is we are still trying to figure out who we are. Meaning that it's an evolution every time we go in to make a new record. We're trying to find that thing that, is it Landline? Is that what we're supposed to sound like? Or is it, the Ghosts record, is it supposed to sound like that? Or any of the other two EPs that are in between that have 5 or 6 songs on them? we've got one unfortunate thing about having so much material out, and because we just spent so much time in the studio, during the pandemic, that we just had so much material laying around to use, was that vetting it and then putting a record together was sort of easy to pick and choose from. And that may be why it sounds so much different than everything else. Is like we just threw everything on a lot of records. We wouldn't cut much. We would just use it all. With Animals, I think we started with 15 songs and pared that down to 10. And that was a different thing that we had not done before. But yeah, this record that's coming up that we're working on right now is going to be basically like a springboard from those other three, because I think we feel like we're hitting our stride now. But
Awesome. Yeah.
elements from each of them and using them in a way that feels more like us.
yeah, I think we're going back a little bit. If that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, no, great, and I'm very much looking forward to what y'all end up putting out next. So this next question, I've got about like 3 or 4 more. These are a little the next few are a little less in depth, but this one I thought would be interesting to ask. It's kind of more on the technical side, but I thought it'd be insightful for our listeners. Particularly, maybe listeners who are interested in making some of their own music in the future. How has your instrumentation and production changed from album to album, and what sort of gear would you recommend for someone who's maybe just starting out and wanting to put out some synth music for themselves?
Oh God. I mean,
Well, as far as the instrumentation goes, it's a little bit of a different beast for us, I would say, just
Yeah.
because, like you said before, most synthwave artists are, just
what's a single
a
producer,
single
right?
person, with a computer, and having the actual instrumentation to try and figure, okay, so what are we playing in the background? What are we actively playing live? That changes the dynamic of.
Well, yeah, when you're not sitting alone facing a monitor by yourself, it's a different work process. But I would say clearly, to anyone who's making any music, the most important thing you can buy if you're going to make your own music is good speakers. It has to start there. I mean, I have had different ones, Yamahas. I've had cheaper stuff, from like Amazon. I've had all different kinds of things. And as I've invested in speakers, and as we've gotten better at trying to do this, we've invested quite a bit into our monitor system now. It's actually several $1,000s now, because we just really feel like hearing is the most important thing. Like when you're hearing your own music clear, and you're able to hear all the different frequencies and mix it correctly, it's like an aha moment almost.
It's the difference between having your stock stereo system in your car and having a subwoofer installed.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Yeah, it's like high
it's
school.
just it's a totally different feel to the sound.
But you can mix with headphones and get good results. So
Yeah.
that's the thing. You don't need to spend a bunch of money to make synthwave either, I don't think. I mean,
But we still go back and listen on the smaller speakers as we're going through
have
and
to.
listening. Yeah, it's just to see, what's it going to sound like in the car? What's it going to sound like, on my little portable speaker? What's it going to sound like on my phone?
Honestly, we make
Yeah.
most of our records with a basic guitar, one keyboard, and a bunch of plugins. I mean, you could probably buy most of the stuff that we use
And a bass.
for I would say, for $1,000 you could probably get everything, and that's it. And it doesn't even cost that much to get into. It's just making it, see a good computer, a good sound card, and some speakers, and you're on your way.
Okay, great. So yeah, everybody out there, take notes. Okay, so next one is this is just kind of I'm kind of curious, just what artists in particular, like what are some of y'all's key influences? Either like musicians or particular genres that inspire you as musicians and that you kind of feed into the music of Kaiser.
Well, I know you want to list some. We're heavily into Celine Dion, I think. It's like one of the.
I do love Celine Dion.
Kaylin
but
is a
no,
Celine Dion
that is not an influence.
I think that the dramaticness or the drama, excuse me, of Celine Dion's performances and her ways have made it into your vocal,
I don't know about that.
for sure. For us, when we got into this genre, the biggies like the Midnight and the Gunship and FM84s have always been in the background, I think, of our minds of production. And in particular, the Midnight's been pushing that envelope in several different ways lately, and that's been interesting to watch. For Kaylin and I think recently too, we found an artist named Droid Bishop. He's an Australian producer. Excellent stuff. We've been just really jiving on that lately too, and so that's been an influence heavily on this next record, I think. Gosh, everybody listens to stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't know how much it makes its way in here. I'm a big proponent of trying to not take too much in.
The thing is, though, I don't
when
think
I'm in an album cycle, I guess.
I don't think that all these people are necessarily influencing our writing style. I think a lot of it is just
what we like to listen to.
What we like to listen to and what we remember too from, childhood, basically.
Yeah.
And getting those nostalgic sounds from video games.
But
from
okay,
movies and all that kind of stuff. That's what's going to influence it. I mean, that does influence all of synthwave, but yeah.
The Weeknd's record just came out.
For
and
sure.
There's things about it I like. There's things about it that are not the best, but there's a hell of a lot of production on there that's awesome. And we're for sure gonna chop some stuff out of there and digest it and possibly take note of that stuff for use, later on or by us at some point. So that's kind of how we're influenced by things. At least that's how I'm influenced by things. I go, wow, that's sweet. I want to do that.
I mean, for me, my biggest thing, right? I try to I like when we tell stories in songs. I think that's a big thing. I think that's something that people can relate to, and I think it's something that they appreciate as well, when there's a story to it. And for me, honestly, my biggest inspiration for that, guys, is my poetry classes from when I was a kid, and short story writing. That is, it's not musical, but it's definitely helped along the way. And I think you have to be able to lyrically pull people in as well as musically pull them in.
Super tough too. It's
Mm-hmm.
That's probably, lyrics are an area that we spend a lot of time trying to refine and get right. Not always the easiest thing.
Yeah. So this next one, this is something I just kind of think about a lot as somebody who's a huge fan of this music. And our show, ELECTRO-POP Therapy, we really try to modern synthwave, and then we go back to 80s new wave, 90s dance stuff. We try to kind of just chart a course back and forth through time on my show. Something I've always been think about sometimes is and it's y'all are also huge fans and producers of synthwave. What do you think about the staying power of the genre? And I kind of to frame that a little bit better, I think back to the late 2000s. You got artists like LaRue, Chromeo to a certain extent. It's really just starting to get really Kavinsky a little bit after that. But I know a lot of people at the time was just oh, this is just kind of a fad. It's retro gazing specifically at the 1980s, but it's now basically outlasted the decade it's supposedly trying to ape. So I was just curious, as fans of the genre, what do you think about the fact that here in 2020 it's still I would argue it's more vibrant than ever. But
sure, I think it's fairly evident just if you're listening to EDM in general, or any electronic music. I think a lot of artists are pulling from that retro
sample
sound.
Retro. It's huge.
Yeah. And so I think, there's a place for it, and I think it's changing and evolving. Because if you listen to synthwave, records that came out last year, they're going to sound a lot different than something came out in, 2014. Still with the same themes, still with the same vibes or whatever, but you hear the production differences. They're vast, I feel like. And I think it's here to stay. But also, it's pop music, like we mentioned earlier, The Weeknd, for instance. I think it's influenced.
This music,
it's similar, but it's not the same as The Weeknd.
This music can do something that's different, though.
Yeah.
Which is take you just like you said earlier.
Journey.
You can go to a place and hear that. Like there's some songs that sound like me standing in line at Cedar Point in 1987, you know, and hearing Def Leppard come out of the outside of a tent or something, even though it's not that song, it's that sound. It can take you to a place. Synthwave, in my mind, is kind of like a vacation. Like it's not regular radio music. It's its own thing. It's got its own set of rules. And people are pushing those rules, but for sure, like any genre, I think it's proven its staying power. I mean, it's got a million subgenres, which always are a good sign that it's going to stick around. So,
well, I'd say just for the nostalgia aspect, I mean, look at all other entertainment right now, with every movie being something from the 80s. You've got Sonic the Hedgehog 2 coming out this year. Like it's you know, it's from when we were children. You got The Matrix just put out another movie. It's everything is about nostalgia right now. You know, it's all about remembering the past, and I don't think that there's a better representation of that than the synthwave genre.
There's nothing new right now. Like if you think about the last couple years, everything's been shut down, nothing's been happening. So like a lot of people are nostalgic for how it was when they were kids and they weren't, you know,
it was
stuck
so
in
much
their houses
simpler.
and everyone was getting sick and like, you know what I mean? It's like it's a vacation.
Oh man, you know, that really hits me in the cockles of my heart. I know, like me being a big fan of music, one of my favorite things to do is just, you know, sit out. Well, not now because it's winter, but like, you know, sit out in the back with my boombox and put on one of my synth tapes, and it just kind of takes you back to being a kid listening to the radio, or maybe not even necessarily being a kid, but like yeah, that transportational aspect of the music. Okay, well, you know, again, I really want to thank y'all for you know, taking time out of your schedule to come on the show, talk about your music. So y'all, two things. Just y'all have a show coming up, and I think you also have a physical release of Animals on the way. So just tell the folks a little bit about how they can see you and how they can get their hands on your music.
Sure. So we have a show this Friday. Doors at 7, show starts at 8. It's Jules Neon Fox, who is coming from Canada, who's going to be spinning some tunes.
He's
and
a Toronto like
yeah.
synthwave legend,
Yeah,
basically.
so he'll be coming out, and then we'll be playing. It's
January 14th, so it's
at
this
the Pyramid
Friday
Scheme.
at Pyramid Scheme. Yep.
And tickets are $12 at the door.
Or you can get them online at BANDCAMP right now.
Right now, BANDCAMP.com.
And then, yeah, following up, we're doing Animals is coming out on vinyl. So we're finally going to do a vinyl release. We've kind of been asked to do that a lot. And we haven't been able to because both Landline and Ghost of Miami were too long for vinyl. So we couldn't fit it. You got to try to keep that to 74 minutes. And we were well past that on both of those records. So yeah, Animals fits a criterion. So we're finally going to put that out. It's looking like it's going to probably be ready. We're hoping in April. So yeah, we're a couple months away still. Production is so slow on vinyl right now.
Slow.
Yeah, that's true. As somebody I collect them, and yeah, that is very true. Lots of backlogs and such. But I'm hopefully I'd love to get my hands on one. Just to be responsible radio host and stuff. Just make sure, you know, everybody. If you plan to go to the show, make sure, you know, vaccinated, and you know, distance as far as this new wave of things goes. You know, be careful, especially if you have people in your life who, for whatever reason, can't get vaccinated. New strain seems to really be hitting hard there, and I'd even recommend, like, you know, maybe try to get tested after you go. But you know, all those parameters. It sounds like there's going to be a really fun time up in GR on Friday the 14th. So
yeah, we're definitely looking forward to getting out and playing. It's the first time we've actually been out in Michigan playing in about 2 years. So we haven't really been playing since then. So yeah, we're excited. But yeah, for sure, take precautions, everybody, you know.
Oh yeah. All right. Is there anything else before we wrap things up? Again, big fan, and thanks for taking time. But yeah, I guess anything as far as how people can find out more about you or find your music.
Sure. Yeah. So we are on Spotify. We are on YouTube. We are on pretty much everywhere you can stream our music. We are on. If you want to check us out on Facebook, it's at Von Kaiser Music. We are also on Twitter, same handle, and at Von Kaiser Band on Instagram. We do have a TikTok as well. Just look at Von Kaiser, and our music is there as well. But you can purchase tickets to the upcoming show on www.vonkaiser.com. You can also get physical merch there. We are selling t-shirts and CDs right now. And what? And the vinyl, yes, in April, not currently, but we on hand have CDs and shirts. I think that's it. Yeah, pre-orders as well. Sorry about that. Pre-orders for vinyl.
Okay, great. Again, thanks for coming on the program, and y'all break a leg on the 14th.
Appreciate it. Thanks for
Thanks, man.
having us.
Thank you.